Before Absalom ever took the throne, he had already crowned himself in his heart. At the table sat Amnon, laughing like sin had no memory and judgment had no feet. David sat between his sons, but he could not see the hatred burning beside him.
When the moment comes, do exactly as I say.
The eternal word, a light unto the ages, now revealed.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bible Told. I'm Pastor Rod. You know, David survived lions, giants, kings, and entire armies. But the one army who nearly destroyed him didn't come from another nation. He came from within his own house. And sometimes the most dangerous problems are not the ones standing outside your door. Nah. They're the ones sitting at your table. You know, the ones carrying your last name, the ones who smile in the family pictures while pain, anger, and resentment are growing underneath the surface. Because a family can look fine and still be falling apart. Everybody can show up. Everybody can speak. Everybody can act like nothing has happened. But just because somebody or nobody is talking about the wound, don't mean the wound is healed. You see, some of you already know exactly what that feels like. I mean, you were waiting for somebody to protect you. You were waiting for somebody to speak up, waiting for somebody to finally admit that what happened was wrong. But instead, everybody stayed quiet, like a lot of people do. And silence has a way of changing people. The person who wanted answers start wanting justice. Oh yeah, you've been there. I know I have. The person who wanted justice starts wanting revenge. And the person who only wanted to be heard may eventually decide they would rather be feared. You see, David knew how to handle enemies on the battlefield. But this battlefield would not begin with swords. It would begin with something David refused to confront. Before a son stole a kingdom, a daughter walked out of a room completely violated and broken. Before David fled Jerusalem in tears, he sat on the throne and remained quiet. And before Absalom became the man who turned Israel against his own father, he was a brother watching his sister suffer while the king, his dad, did absolutely nothing. One terrible decision was about to tear David's entire family apart. And nobody inside the palace understood how far the damage would spread. This is the story of David and Absalom. And it all began with a prince who wanted something that never belonged to him.
The trouble began with David's oldest son, Amnon, because while David's anger eventually became silence, Absalom sipped of his cousin Jonadab. He created a plan to get her alone. He pretended to be sick and asked David to send Tamar to prepare food for him. David agreed. Tamar entered Amnon's room, believing she was helping her brother. But once they were alone, Amnon grabbed her. Tamar begged him to stop. She reminded him that what he was doing was evil in Israel. She even pleaded with him to speak to the king rather than disgrace her. But Amnon would not listen, and after violating her, the desire he claimed was love immediately turned into hatred. He ordered Tamar out of the room and had the door locked behind her. Tamar tore the royal robe she was wearing, placed ashes on her head, and walked away crying. When Absalom saw his sister, he immediately understood what had happened. He brought Tamar into his home. Then David heard about it. The Bible says David became furious, but David did not punish Amnon, and Absalom said nothing. For 2 years, he did not confront his brother. He did not threaten him. He simply waited, because while David's anger eventually became silence, Absalom's anger was becoming a plan. 2 years passed. Amnon continued living as a prince. David continued ruling as king. But Absalom had not forgotten what happened to Tamar. When the time came for Absalom's sheep to be sheared, he invited David and all the king's sons to attend the celebration. David declined, so Absalom asked him to send Amnon instead. At first, David questioned the request, but Absalom kept pressing until the king finally allowed Amnon and the other princes to go. Before the feast began, Absalom gave his servants a command. Wait until Amnon is relaxed from drinking, then strike him, and do not be afraid, because I have ordered it.
Hold it! Now! Hold it down! Let move it! Strike the line! Down! Strike! Strike! Just strike!
When the moment came, Absalom's servants killed Amnon. The rest of David's sons jumped up, mounted their mules, and fled. Then word reached Jerusalem that Absalom had killed every one of the king's sons. David tore his clothes and fell to the ground. The report was wrong. Only Amnon was dead, but the damage had already been done. David had refused to bring justice into his house, so Absalom brought revenge. And after killing his brother, Absalom ran from Jerusalem and fled to Geshur. David had now lost one son to murder and another son to exile.
Now, let me stop right here, because this is where the story starts making sense. Absalom, he did wrong. Let us be clear about that. He planned the murder of his own brother. He waited for the right moment, and then he had Amnon killed. That's not justice now. That's called revenge. I understand his sister was violated, but that's not justice. But we can't ignore how he got to this point. Tamar, she was violated inside his father's own house. And then think about it. David hears about what happens. David becomes angry, but David don't do nothing. And then sometimes doing nothing is still a decision. You see, Amnon was allowed to keep living like everything was cool. He was still sitting at the king's table, smiling. I'm a prince, right? Still carrying his title, while his sister Tamar was living with that pain of her of what he had done. And then Absalom, he saw all of it. He sits in the corner. He's looking like, oh, I see what you did. He saw his sister broken. He saw his brother protected. And then he saw his father remain silent. So for 2 years, Absalom, he held that anger inside of him. Now, some of you already know what that feels like. I mean, you were hurt by somebody, but the people who were supposed to protect you, they acted like it was nothing it wasn't that serious. They told you, man, just move on, girl, move on. They told you to keep your peace. They expected you to sit in the same room, smile at the same people, and then pretend nothing happened. That ain't me. I'm not a pretender. You see, just because nobody talks about the wound doesn't mean the wound is healed. Sometimes silence does not bring peace. Sometimes silence gives bitterness room to grow. And that is what has happened inside the David's household. You see, David may have believed time would settle everything. That's what he thought. I'm just going to let it go. He learned his lesson. She'll forget about it. You see, but time doesn't always heal what people refuse to confront. Now, he got a whole problem. Amnon, his son, he dead. And his other son, Absalom, he done ran away. Tamar, she's still carrying the pain. That's still a brother. She still remember what he did to her, but her brother dead. And her other brother gone. And David has now, he's left grieving two sons. One son he got to bury. The other son was alive, but he was gone. And here is where it gets complicated. Because even after everything Absalom had done, David still loved his son. David missed his son. Part of him, he wanted Absalom back in Jerusalem. But wanting somebody back and knowing how to repair the relationship, they're not the same thing, y'all. You see, David had spent his whole life fighting enemies on the battlefield, but he didn't know how to deal with the brokenness inside of his own family. And that failure was about to cost him more than he could imagine, because Absalom, he would eventually come home. Oh, he's coming. But he would not come home healed. He would come home carrying years of rejection, anger, and resentment. And while David was trying to avoid another painful confrontation, Absalom was about to discover that the fastest way to hurt a king was not to attack his army. It was to steal the hearts of his people.
Absalom remained in Geshur for 3 years, and although David grieved over Amnon, his heart slowly began to turn toward the son who was still alive. Joab could see it, so he arranged for a woman from Tekoa to tell David a story about a family torn apart by murder and revenge. The story forced David to confront his own situation. Eventually, David agreed to let Absalom return to Jerusalem. But there was one condition. Absalom was not allowed to see the king. So Absalom came home, but his father would not meet with him. For 2 more years, he lived in Jerusalem without seeing David's face. He was close enough to see the palace, close enough to know his father was there, but still shut out. Finally, Absalom sent for Joab. Joab ignored him. Absalom sent again. Joab still refused to come. So Absalom ordered his servants to set Joab's field on fire. That got his attention. When Joab demanded an explanation, Absalom told him he would rather have stayed in Geshur than live in Jerusalem, rejected by his own father. Joab went to David, and at last, Absalom was brought before the king. He bowed with his face to the ground. David reached out and kissed him. For a moment, it looked like the family had been restored. But a kiss can welcome someone back without healing what drove them away. Absalom had returned to the palace, but the anger was still there. The rejection was still there. And soon the son David brought back home would begin building a kingdom of his own. Absalom began appearing at the city gate every morning. When people came seeking justice, Absalom tended to them. He told them their case was right. Then he suggested that if he were judge, everyone would finally be heard. When anyone bowed before him, Absalom reached out, embraced them, and treated them like a friend. Little by little, he stole the hearts of Israel. Then Absalom traveled to Hebron and declared himself king. The conspiracy spread quickly. Even Ahithophel, one of David's trusted counselors, joined the rebellion. When news reached David, he knew Jerusalem was no longer safe. So the king gathered his servants and fled. David walked out of the city barefoot with his head covered, weeping as he climbed the Mount of Olives. The man who had once entered Jerusalem as a conquering hero was now leaving it humiliated by his own son. Absalom entered the city and took control of the palace. But David's army remained loyal. Soon, the two sides met in the forest of Ephraim. Before the battle, David gave one clear command: deal gently with Absalom for my sake. Even after losing his kingdom, David still wanted his son protected. During the battle, Absalom rode beneath the branches of a great tree. His head became caught, and the mule beneath him kept moving. Absalom was left hanging helplessly between heaven and earth.
I am your new king.
Help me! Help me! Help me!
When Joab heard what had happened, he ignored David's command. He drove weapons into Absalom's heart, and Joab's men finished the attack. The rebellion was over. David's kingdom had been saved. But when the message reached the king, David did not celebrate. He went into the room above the gate and wept. "My son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you." David regained his throne, but he lost his son. Absalom wanted his father's kingdom. David only wanted his child back. And by the time both of them understood what their anger, silence, and rebellion had cost, it was already too late.
Man, what a story. You know, David got his kingdom back, but he didn't get his son back. And when David heard Absalom was dead, he didn't celebrate like a king whose enemy had been defeated. He cried like a father whose child was gone. "My son Absalom, my son Absalom, if I only had died instead of you." Man, that's a father's love for his son. Even after all of the dirt, after all of the wrong his son did, he still loved his son. After the betrayal, after losing his palace, after being humiliated in front of the entire nation, David still called him son. Let's be clear about something. Absalom was wrong. What happened to Tamar was absolutely wrong. David's silence was wrong, but Absalom's pain, it didn't give him permission to murder his brother, manipulate the people, and rebel against his father. You see, pain can explain your actions, but pain don't excuse everything you do. Absalom, he started out wanting justice for his sister. That's beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about Tamar and it started being about him. You see, his pain became bitterness. His bitterness became revenge, and his revenge eventually destroyed him. But David also had to live with the consequences of what he refused to deal with. David knew how to fight lions. David knew how to fight giants. David knew how to fight armies. But when trouble entered his own house, David became silent. Wow. And sometimes doing nothing does more damage than people actually realize. Because just because nobody is talking about the wound, it don't mean the wound is healing. You see, some of you know exactly what that feels like. Something happened in your family. Don't know what it is. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it happened, but nobody wanted to deal with it. So everybody kept smiling. Hey, hi Amy. Hey Roy. Everybody kept showing up. Everybody kept pretending everything was all right. But underneath the smiles, somebody was still hurting. You were hurting. Watch this. Let this story be a warning. Do not let what somebody did to you turn you into somebody God never called you to be. Don't allow bitterness to sit in your heart for so long that it starts making decisions for you. Because Absalom, he got the throne, he got the palace, he got the attention. People saying, "You're our king." Even took one of David's right-hand men. He even got the people to shout his name, but none of it healed him. You can win the argument and still lose your family. You can get revenge and still never find peace. And you can finally get everything you thought you wanted, only to find out that it didn't fix what was broken inside of you. David survived lions, giants, kings, and entire armies. But the battle inside his own house left a wound that no victory could ever erase. And remember, when the world is still trying to figure things out, the Bible told it first.